Greetings, children of the night. I'm going to be talking today about Quincey Morris, who was just introduced in Dracula and to new readers via Dracula Daily, the Texan who sometimes lapses into very ridiculous cowboy slang, who is usually left out of movie adaptations of Dracula, but as you will see if this is your first time reading, will prove to be very important to the plot. Now, his presence is, it can feel a little jarring if you're reading, you going from sort of these baby-eating succubi in a castle, and sort of then there's a guy, I ain't good enough to regulate the fixing of your little shoes. But it's not quite as weird as you might think. Now, legends of the Wild West were spread via dime novels. If you've ever seen the movie Unforgiven, you may know the dorky little writer guy who's trying to make everything seem grander and more noble than it actually is. That's that. Another tradition that was going on in popular literature at the time was the ghost story. These are very popular in Victorian literature. If you want to look at any halfway decent local library, I guarantee you'll find an anthology of Victorian ghost stories. Obviously, Charles Dickens made this famous in Christmas Carol, which is a lot darker and more horror-oriented than a lot of people realize, or in a more strictly horror vein, Henry James in The Turn of the Screw, or M.R. James in any number of short stories. But these are also connected to the Wild West. Doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to record this without sirens, so for the purposes of this, I'm a justified cowboy gunslinger and the posse's chasing me, whatever. So, Old West and the supernatural. Now, there's the tradition of fearsome critters. They had a short about this for Gravity Falls with the Hide Behind. And these and other tall tales like Pecos Bill, they weren't like things people took seriously in the vein that some places in history have genuinely believed in vampires, werewolves, witches, so forth. But they were stories you told around the campfire and you kind of exaggerated them, and maybe some of them got a little genuinely spooky. And some stories of these filtered back, and, well, overlapping genres happens to this day. Robert E. Howard, you may know as the creator of Conan the Barbarian, Red Sonja, whole host, Solomon Kane, whole host of pulp heroes. He also wrote some Weird West stories. Now, the pulps were kind of the descendant of the dime novel, just usually in sort of short magazine form, sometimes full novel length, but a lot of the writers who grew out of the pulps, H.P. Lovecraft, or in the crime genre, Philip Marlowe, creator of Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler, these would be short story lengths. And Robert E. Howard has actually a very scary short story called, if you can believe it, Pigeons from Hell. Yeah. You can find it because it's in public domain if you click around on the internet, and it is so good. I'm not actually the biggest fan of Robert E. Howard, or at least I didn't really like the Solomon Kane stories that I tried to read, but this is very good. Cowboys are a big part of the American myth. Arguably more than the dime novels, what's kept them around in our consciousness is movies, westerns. And these have varied from like cheerful singing stuff to sort of, it's a hard life out there, but a man's got to do what a man's got to do, to to sort of gritty tales of anti-heroes, to just outright down scuzzy villain stories. Whatever America seems to want to hear about itself in the moment. And yeah, the ghosts have stuck around too. Now, I can't give you a whole history of the genre in a little ramble video. But I am going to talk about some notable works. This one, I don't know how notable it is. I saw it free on YouTube. I'm not sure if it's still there, but it's a movie called Grim Prairie Tales, and it stars James Lee. I'm messing up so much today. It stars James Earl Jones and somebody else. All that matters in the movie is James Earl Jones. And the two of them are telling ghost stories. They're trading off. It's an anthology horror movie. This guy traveling across the West, and he meets up with this mysterious bounty hunter, played by James Earl Jones. And it's sort of, what's interesting is less the individual ghost stories, but sort of this mysterious figure. I really thought he was going to turn out to be Death or the Devil or something, but they never really tell you what his deal is. But just this sort of, this deep-voiced stranger. And he's coming up to your campfire, and he's going to share the night there. And he's going to tell you some things he's seen. Maybe he's just a great big liar, but maybe he's not. It's actually, I kind of wonder if Stephen King ever saw this silly little movie, because the vibe of this character, he really feels like he should be in the Dark Tower, like sort of a spiritual figure who's kind of an unreliable ally. The Dark Tower is another example of the Weird West, though there it's stylistic. It does not literally take place in the American Old West. It's post-apocalyptic, alternate universe, Stephen King, meta, crossover, Michael Moorcock style universe thing. If I try to explain the Dark Tower books, I will be here all day and I will still have gotten everything wrong, I guarantee you. So that's a more contemporary one. For sort of ghosts and monsters. Now, I want to talk about the movie Ravenous just for a little, because it exemplifies one of the problems with Weird West, which is the character of the magical Native American. Now, as the cowboy is one of sort of the America's self-mythologizing, it goes without saying, but should still be said, that the great fundamental crime that this country is built on is the murder and oppression of the people who already lived there. And either out of guilt at like, oh, something bad is going to come of all this, we deserve it, or whatever you want to say, or alternately, sort of the view that, oh, you know, we can justify destroying those people because they're savages or pagans or something, and who knows what their witchy wiles are. And obviously, you'll note, if you're Jewish, if you're Romani, these are not new things they say. In any case, Ravenous isn't outright, like, explicitly racist, and I don't think that was the intention, but the monster, the Wendigo, I am not a folklorist. I like reading about folklore, but I am not an expert, but that's not how the Wendigo works. And look, maybe you don't think that matters. That's okay. If you don't think it, you don't think it. But it's representative of sort of mining, once again, mining the culture that predates the United States, and then sort of not really respecting it. On the other hand, Ravenous is a good example of how scary the Weird West can get, because it's kind of like The Thing, for that matter. If you are trapped in an isolated place, oh, and it's getting cold, and there's snow everywhere, In an isolated snowstorm, no one can hear you scream. They played with this also in a non-supernatural version in The Hateful Eight. So there's also less horrific, more kind of goofy action that borders a bit on horror in the role-playing game Deadlands, which is another one where I have mixed feelings about it. I've had a lot of fun playing it, and it's this alternate universe where at the Battle of Gettysburg, the dead rose, and that set off a thing where magic started happening and monsters started appearing and mysterious people called the Reckoners started trying deliberately to spread fear, and the country is fractioned off into a lot of factions. There's a lot of fun stuff in it, and like I said, I've had fun playing it. And they're the problem, and this actually brings up the Weird West overlaps with Southern Gothic. You can also see that in the story Pigeons from Hell. I understand, or at least I feel like I understand why they did this, but Deadlands tries to portray the independent Confederacy as not like the good guys, but as morally equivalent to the Union. And like I said, I think the reason they did this is less that they're sort of lost cause proponents than that they wanted to let you play people from various different factions, which I understand, but this isn't Warhammer 40K where you can cheer skulls for the Skull Throne. This is a real thing that really happened. They actually took that into account, and the newest version of Deadlands isn't out yet, but they said it will be made so that there is not a Confederacy as sort of a playable faction. And they said this is partly because they got enough factions they didn't feel they needed, and partly, and this is a take I admire, that they felt sort of the alternate history advantages they were getting weren't worth it if it was making players have a bad time. Not everyone is happy about that change, but overall I think it's probably for the best, and if you don't like it and really need the Confederacy in your game, you can go back and draw the mythology from the older editions. That's the fun thing about role-playing games. Now let's see, there were, I mentioned in the 70s, spaghetti westerns, so-called because they were often made in Italy, very cheap, and American films inspired by spaghetti westerns. That's where you get like these dark anti-heroes, and probably the darkest is in the movie High Plains Drifter, which, God, everything I'm mentioning I have mixed feelings about. I love this movie. I can't recommend this movie to anybody. The Clint Eastwood, who I probably love it because I have a thing for young spaghetti western era Clint Eastwood, but his character is, I guess, in the right, or at least he's the protagonist, but he does a lot of evil things, and they're not supposed to be good that he does them, but we are supposed to root for him over the other guys, and sort of one of this, there's no way to avoid saying it, there's a pretty unnecessary rape scene, and for whatever reason, I can still watch the movie and enjoy it, but I would not suggest anyone go into it without being warned that that happens, and relatively soon to the start. But the things I do like are sort of as the conflict intensifies. Well, first of all, the town gets literally painted red, which is very cool. And you start seeing hints about something very bad this town did that they're going to be punished for. And you start to wonder, who's Clint Eastwood's character? Why does he have memories of what looks like a man being murdered? A man that looks a lot like him. It's just, there's just something about this mysterious stranger being this otherworldly figure of not justice, but vengeance. It's so creepy cool. Let's see, other Weird West stuff. Music. Want to make sure I talk about this. Now, country music is a wide genre, overlaps sometimes with blues and with folk. Even bluegrass can overlap even with classical violin, just ask the Punch Brothers. But it also has started to overlap with punk, which is really cool. I say has started. It's been in effect for a while. You could even make arguments about some of the more rock and roll Johnny Cash stuff. Certainly, it's not punk, but but the Highwaymen song is very Weird West. Let's see. So yeah, there's a lot of country music that kind of starts to overlap with punk and even with goth. Lonesome Wyatt has done some of like the actually scariest story songs I've ever heard. Ooh, I like him, but I often can't listen to him because like his song The Golden Rule is just but I am actually wearing a shirt. I had thought it would show up better in the video, but the Bloody Jug Band, they are so much fun, and they have, they definitely go all out on sort of the goth undead gunslinger thing. One of their albums is called Coffin Up Blood, and it's great. Like, it has a song about the devil failing to woo a nice church girl and feeling very hurt that he's unable to do that. Songs about werewolves, songs about criminals breaking out of hell. I definitely recommend them. What's another good one? 16 Horsepower. They're a little more Christian, which, as in, they're not like sort of designed to spread the word, but they lead heavily into religious themes, which is pretty common in a lot of folk and country music. Their best known song is probably Black Soul Choir. Wonderful song. Let's see, and just think back, I mentioned how much it overlaps with folk music, and a lot of those have ghost stories. I mentioned Johnny Cash, Long Black Veil. Some people have found some contemporary Weird West stuff, again, kind of jarring. I'm thinking of the people who didn't like Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare, which I get. I'm honestly not too big a fan of zombies. I think they've become overdone and we haven't seen enough genuine innovation in them for a while, but I liked Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare because it actually did the High Plains Drifter thing where it used the supernatural as a means of vengeance. In the main game, Red Dead Redemption 1, I haven't played 2 yet, there's so many bad guys who go unpunished, and sort of the zombie alternate universe expansion is every one of those guys is going to get what's coming to them, and it's not going to be by the hand of God, it's going to be by the hand of zombies, which I can't not like that. I did not see the movie Cowboys and Aliens. I heard mixed things about it, but just when I saw the trailer, some people laughed, but I thought, yeah, why not? If extraterrestrials exist and have been visiting us for a long time, why not the Old West? I think that's pretty awesome. And I think that spirit, that's where Quincey Morris comes in, is sort of the mingling of the ghost story with the sort of adventurous cowboy knight kind of character. I should also mention there's some theories which I don't think we have any actual written proof of this, but I find it an entertaining theory that Quincey was modeled on the great American poet Walt Whitman, who was very, I'm terrible at describing poetry, but very rugged, in tune with nature kind of guy. And we know Bram Stoker was a big fan of his. He wrote a fan letter to him that reads a lot like a love letter. So while he was not Texan, it makes a certain amount of sense that he could be drawing some aspects that he likes into that. So to anyone thinking of making a future Dracula adaptation, and maybe there is one of you who watches this, consider Quincey Morris, because he is goofy, and a lot of people start out liking him ironically. And I wouldn't blame you if you toned down some of the dialogue, but there's a lot you can work with there of someone who's seen strange things in strange places. Someone who's had to learn how to survive in the wilderness in the way a lot of the so-called civilized heroes really haven't. And pitting him against an entirely different environment, an entirely different monster. But what do you do when there's a wild predator stalking you in the forest or the desert? You adapt or you die. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.